Welcome to Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow. My name is Mariana Cordier, and I am your host. Redistricting continues to be in the news. My guest today will give us the latest news on redistricting and what is going on. My first guest is Beth Hufnagel. She is from the League of Women Voters, but she's also the chair of the Redistricting Commission of her organization. And Gloria Aparicio-Blackwell, who was an advisor to the State Commission on Redistricting. And I'm gonna chime in every now and then because I was the chair of the Montgomery County Redistricting Commission. So today you all are going to hear about redistricting, but how we got there first is really important to know. How important the census information and results were to all our efforts with regard to redistricting. And Gloria, I know you were worked very hard in getting the folks to turn out and answer the forms and get the information correctly out there for the census, and talk to us about that.
Yes, Mariana, it was an interesting process. As you know, every 10 years, we go through the process of counting how many people are now in our communities. And that's something that it really drives then the direction of getting, okay, are we having the right size in each community? And then start drawing the maps. If we need the maps that have to be changed because the communities have grown, this is the process for it with the census number. And as you can see that we did this it was Census 2020 by April 1st. That was April 1st of 2020 was the day of completing the process of getting all those forms completed online, very different ways of collecting data and getting people out in canvassing and asking those questions and completing the form. And then the pandemic came in. So with that in mind, we had to change the way of collecting that data. And for college students, it was a different also set of points that we needed to come across, in a sense, to tell the students, you live in the community that you are studying at, know where your parents are. So to change that mindset was another strategy that we had to struggle and also to get the point across. So with that in mind, that once we collected those numbers, then the redistricting came to take place. And that will be fitting the numbers, how many people have they changed the population, where it has changed, and how do we need to expand or reduce because of the numbers based on the data that was collected for the census. And in the last 10 years, at least in Maryland, it's changed a lot. The population has become immensely more diverse. Yeah. And you know, not only was the pandemic challenging for the census, but the census information actually was provided late to the commissions. I know that in Montgomery County, we didn't get the information until September, where traditionally you get it sooner than that. So you can start looking at the maps and the populations and adjusting. So that was a bit of a challenge. Beth, what as the league did you guys see as a challenge for the different redistricting commissions?
Well, the fact that there were different redistricting commissions, that was very unusual when we try to explain that to others, to our colleagues in other states. It takes a lot of explaining. But I think we saw a couple of different models, and that was very interesting. You know, the governor's was a multi-partisan. They got along beautifully. Everyone agreed. The maps came out, and it was a consensus, truly a consensus. And then we have the more traditional, the Legislative Advisory Commission, and that was strictly bipartisan. So unaffiliated people were not represented at all. And it went on a purely party line vote, which if I were a gambling woman, I would have gambled on 5 years ago. If I knew anything about redistricting 5 years ago, which I did not.
What made you get up and informed and an expert on redistricting?
I think back in 2017, 2018, the executive director of the league at that point, Ashley Olson, was on commissions. Redistricting commissions, and she's a national expert, and she was offering to teach us and do workshops with members of the league, and I was like, wow, this is great to be taught by this person and to be in this Plus, redistricting is gonna be one of the basic fabrics of democracy. To get it right, who picks who the voters pick, or do other people pick who represents them? And of course, the league thinks voters should be picking. And this is really important. It goes into all areas, not just the census. Can be voter suppression, the apathy, the trust that the voters have for the people in charge. This all wraps up in redistricting.
And that's one of the things that I feel that we need to do more work in terms of educating our population. It was disheartening to see so many of the town halls that were all, particular for the state commission, that was done via Zoom, the few and far in between people that came to those. A lot of came from a particular group that were coming, a lot of representations, but from the Black and brown community was very minimal. In other languages, very minimal. And if people, and the questions that I received from the community was, I don't understand what redistribution is all about. I don't know what you're asking. What is it that this means? So it's a massive, I think that is a massive education that we need to start considering, not a year before or a few months before the process. It's too late. And if we can bring that back, civic engagement, civics, into the curriculum in the schools, I think we're going to be doing a better job on this, I believe, because I saw that the lack of not interest in participating, and sometimes it might not be interest because they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. So in that case, we have to do a better job in that regard.
Well, I think that's a really good point, because being on the commission, you know, I did my homework before I started, and being a lawyer, I already had some background to it with election law and stuff like that. But, you know, one of the biggest concerns as a chair that I had was that the rest of the commissioners on the commission understand what the role was and what were the ground rules or the parameters that we had to look at to make sure that it was fair and according to the population numbers and the division. Because, you know, some terms like communities of interest and you know, that the districts, when they're created, be, you know, relatively compact, and that those concepts were not concepts that, you know, unless you read the Supreme Court cases and the evaluation of whether or not a district was gerrymandered, even gerrymandering, they weren't as familiar as to what that meant, what was the definition. And so, you know, we did that homework by having, you know, the Brennan Center come and give, you know, a legal, you know, explanation and background on how, you know, the law needs to be applied for committing, you know, drawing those lines. But, you know, even within those definitions, there's a lot of room to maneuver that could really dilute the vote of one group or another. And so, you know, I know the league is very much for making sure that, you know, it is very, you know, fair, that the communities are represented, and working towards districts being, you know, reflective of their population, of the community members. What outreach or education does the league provide for, you know, voters to know about this stuff?
What we started back in 2018. I looked up when my first workshops were back in 2018. It was hard to get anybody enthused about it back then because it is a bit arcane, and it was like, oh, it's years away. Who cares about that? But I think what we're doing now is, and we worked with Tame the Gerrymander Coalition with Common Cause Maryland and Joanne Antoine a great deal on this, and we publicized the commission's hearings. And that is one big thing that our coalitions did. And what we'd like to see for next time is that it is not the nonprofit's job to advertise and get people out and identify communities of interest. That's not our job. That should be the commission's job. But they need the funding for it, of course.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
they need to be directed to do it. So that's one of the things we'd like to change. However, you know, in the meantime, in the 10 years until that happens, one of the things that we're working on is getting into the high schools. The leagues have in most cases, very strong relationships with the local board of election. And because we are doing voter registration of young people. And this is and now we're starting like to get into a program. We have one as sample from Harford County, where the high school students themselves put together a little video explaining what redistricting is and why it's important to register to vote. And I hope to do a whole series of these. And again,
That's
by
amazing.
the high school students.
That's amazing because like Gloria said before, I think you have to, in the civic education in high school, you know, it's no longer about, you know, you have a right to vote according to constitutional amendment. It's so much more complicated. I mean, what about the electoral college and the issues with that? And redistricting is a component of that, and the Voters' Right Act is a component of that. And so, you know, Gloria, is there any initiatives or anything for you know, reaching out to the younger students and getting the civic education out there?
As a matter of fact, there is right now, it's the civic engagement is that one of the components that the University System of Maryland is putting together, working with each institution in the system to come up with a plan and see how we can get the college students along with the pre-K to 12 getting together to work on this. Because if they're coming right now from the school system, from the pre-K to 12 or the higher school coming into college, ready to vote, ready with that mindset that they need to be part of the voting system is critical. So, and explaining all of that. Now, 2017, the census came to us. The census representative came to the university because they were committed to start engaging with the college campuses. And they saw that the numbers for this area in Prince George's County, in particular for the city of College Park, was really, we needed to do some work on it because the numbers came really low. So in that case, I feel that, as you mentioned, Beth, that is important that the government, the institutions that are responsible to have the count and to have the redistricting right, the maps right, they need to be investing on this. And they put for the census, they put a curriculum that now they can be, that you can download and even add it into your classroom work, and easy to add it to the particular for the pre-K to 12. So they are also thinking about getting into the college campuses as well. So I think that there is room for us to start kind of creating innovative way in how do we activate communities and rally them in order to get behind this. Because if they don't know if the census is the number that is used for getting resources to the community, they're going to be having the situation of having lacking in resources, because the numbers are not going to be helping in getting those resources down. So, but they need to understand why it's important to complete that form. It got politicized last time. Hopefully for the next one, for the 2030, might be different. I don't know if we're going to be there for that 2030. Hopefully I will, but I don't know if we're working in the census. But I've made a promise I will be doing something if I'm still around. So anyway, but that's something that we really need to be putting more emphasis. Education is important. Getting the word out, finding ways to activate those individuals and get them involved.
So what's the status of the state redistricting map? Because I know that the filing dates for candidates has been pushed back, and the primary has been pushed back because the map had not been approved yet for the state. Do you know, Beth, what's the status of that?
We have maps, Mariana. We have maps, definite maps. The filing date for candidates for the legislature was April 15th. That was last Friday. And it was a bit of a scramble and some surprises. Maryland Matters. If you're interested, I would recommend that It's a free subscription to Maryland Matters. It's an online journalism. They follow this. And now the interesting part is you talk about the census being important, but only if those numbers are actually used and used fairly. And there was quite a bit of resistance in some areas where the numbers had dropped. Baltimore City, the far west, the far east, there was resistance to giving up their representation, but which they had to. And the legislative maps were done by the ones the legislature passed stand. So they stand now. There's at least one interesting item that the judge pointed out of the Court of Appeals, which is Maryland's Supreme Court. There are some interesting items that might be worth some follow-up. Now, the congressional map, I'm very excited in the end. It was much more compact than the original version. And the legislature worked for 5 days, and especially legislative services, bless them. These people are so dedicated, you never hear their names. Worked for like 5 days straight to redo a map, our congressional map, which is by measurements, by statistical measurements, so much more compact and so much less biased. So I think we'll have a far more interesting election cycle this time. And yes, the primary is going to be July 19th, whether or not here it comes. And the state and the local board of elections have quite a heavy lift to get all this redone. So they have to do everything. It's not just the Congress and your state senator and your state delegate. It's also the county, the commissioners or the county council. All of that has to be redone. And new precincts. So what I do want to remind people is, if you can, do the mail-in ballot, because you may show up where you think you were supposed to vote and they couldn't get it. They don't even know where to try to get places to vote, for example.
Well, so let me ask you about that, because that's a super important point. There's the mail-in ballot, then there's the early voting sites, and then there's the actual election. So, and I know the league is really big in helping getting voters registered. So is there still time to register to vote?
The law was changed. You can now walk in on the day of the election and register to vote.
Awesome. And
So
how do you
same
get
day
a mail?
registration?
How do you get a mail-in ballot?
Just Google and go to the Maryland State Board of Elections, and then look up there, and there will be a link, and you can request a ballot, mail-in ballot. And I would suggest that you do that, because that will be so much more convenient, and then also send it in. Now, if you get the mail-in ballot and for some reason it gets lost and you don't actually mail it back, you can still go in, you'll file a provisional ballot, you can put in a provisional ballot, and then they'll check and they'll make sure you didn't put in the other ballot. Nobody votes twice in Maryland, and then they will make sure that your vote will be recorded. The first one in is the only one they will take from you.
So
now for the early, I'm sorry, Gloria, what were you going to say?
go ahead for the early voting. What were you going to ask?
So for the early voting sites, do you have to go to a particular one, or can you go to any of them?
You can go anyone in your county. Now you have to stay in your county because the other counties don't have your ballot. And there's going to be still, unfortunately, many, many variations of ballot. Howard County had 130, I think, 2 years ago. And I think Montgomery County was more. So make sure you get your right ballot, and but you can go to any early voting site in your county that you are registered in.
So if you're hearing this, please consider going, if you don't do the mail-in ballot, the early voting site, so you don't have to worry about being in the right precinct.
But the map, they are still working with the maps, because I think that even though the election is going to be for the primaries July 19, there's still, there might be some changes for some people. Is that right? In terms of the map?
No, the maps are final. The
Okay.
Supreme Court, our Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, finalized them. So both the legislative and the congressional maps are finalized. I believe all of the two lawsuits in Prince George's and Baltimore County have been resolved. So I believe those were finalized several weeks ago. And your local board of elections have been working like mad with the latest version they had to attempt to get everything finalized and figure out where the precincts are and try to get places to vote, that will agree to be voting places.
What I see this time with the people participation, I can see that have galvanized a lot of individuals in getting to be candidates and all of that. I see a group of number of people for the different counties, particularly Montgomery County, and I'm pretty sure that Prince George's and the others are going through the same. So it will be very interesting to see how the dynamic in changing the political representation, that's what we want. The state of Maryland is the number 4 state in the nation, the most diverse state in the nation. Hopefully that the political sphere will be representing that.
Well, and so, one of the things that you hear a lot of is that the Hispanic community sometimes doesn't show up to vote, and young people sometimes don't show up to vote. So lumping them both together in the category of what can we do, or what should we attempt to encourage turnout?
I have 2 words: social media.
Well, so
you have to go to the community too. You have to be in the places of faith and going into those community events. You really have to say to them how important it is. There is a lot of individuals out there, they don't believe in the system. They feel that their vote doesn't count, and they feel that why should I spend this time for what? And I always tell them the most important election are your local elections. Get involved. And of course, all elections are important, but if you want to, don't put aside the local election, because that's where they determine a lot of things that will be impacting you in your local community. And the largest scheme, we always have to be exercising that right that we have, that not too many people have it.
So I have been noticing.
If I can plug,
Beth.
I can plug about the local ones, sometimes it seems difficult to get information about local races, the various candidates. And I want to plug, the league does something called Vote 411, where just Google Vote 411, and you can get in, you tell them where you live, and it'll tell you what the candidates are and link you to the candidates' statements that they have made. We don't do evaluations, but the candidates' statements, and you have everybody that is going to be on your ballot in one place.
I have to say, I have to congratulate the league, because every time I get in the mail the breakdown of who's running, their statements and all that kind of stuff, and I actually take that with me so I remember who and what I've decided I was going to vote for. But that is such a huge effort to make, and to do it every election. I mean, congratulations to the league for doing that.
Thank you. And it's all volunteers, and we'd be delighted to have more.
Oh, so how do you volunteer for the league?
Oh, the easiest thing is just go to our website, lwvmd.org, and sign up.
That's awesome. I guess I have to say thank you so much for doing that, because it's very helpful. We've got about 2 minutes left. Gloria, I'm going to give you the last minute. What, if anything, do you want the audience to remember?
Listen, this is the most important thing, that you need to be involved, getting to be counted with the census, redistricting, getting to learn more about redistricting, finding to volunteer with the League of Women Voters. They have done tremendous work in the community in keeping us informed. We have to protect democracy, and the only way is doing voting, getting engaged, getting involved, and asking your local elected officials to do, and your elected officials, period, to do the right thing for your community.
I have to agree with that. I have to say that I don't think in a mid-year, midterm elections, people realize how incredibly important it is. It's just as important as when we have the presidential elections, and there's so much opportunity to volunteer, get involved. And if you're not going to get involved, at least get informed so that you can participate. Don't forget to request your mail-in ballot or go vote early so you don't have any issues. I'd like to thank my guests who did an awesome job in giving us an update on redistricting, and our audience for hearing us and listening. And you can catch us this show, Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow show on YouTube, and we're also on Facebook. I am Mariana Cordier, and I'll see you next time.